What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Forgotten Jesus podcast. My name is Andrew Bolton. We have Pastor Rabbi Gowdy and Miss Cool Candy today. If you're watching on YouTube, what's up with those glasses? Those sunglasses?
They're not really sunglasses, but the lights don't bother you, Andrew?
I think I'm just so used to them.
Because Robbie's not really, well, you only have one, but the lights in my face, they're a little bright.
Right.
So this helps me to not get a migraine.
Okay, well, that's worth it.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll just take Excedrin.
She asked me
Especially on a
about
cloudy day like today with the weather.
She asked me if they look good. I said about as good as the bun.
Oh, well, listen. Okay, so we ran
we
a
get
poll.
our results?
I wear
we
a
ran
bun
a poll,
on purpose now
and
just to bother him.
more people were on Team Bun than they were
No.
Ponytail.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Well, here's what's funny. I actually did a little research the other day, and I went and asked ChatGPT what.
Finally, about time.
No,
Oh,
I,
no,
yes. No, I asked ChatGPT.
This is terrible.
This is what I see when I look at. No, this is what I see when I look at Candy. This right here.
What?
This, a sumo wrestler with the bun on his head. That's what I see when I see Candy with the little.
What?
Yeah.
And you don't see the character from Wendy's, the restaurant, when she has pigtails?
She doesn't have pigtails. She's got a bun.
I know, that's what I'm saying, but you want it. Moving on. Okay,
yeah.
today, Pastor.
I like a ponytail.
Pony.
Not pigtail, ponytail.
I think you may have said pigtails.
Nate Sala's in the house today.
Yeah, Nate, are you
Apologist,
team bun
YouTube.
or ponytail?
Nate, gonna ask you a question. Do you like your wife with a ponytail or a bun?
Oh, no! Bun.
Thank
yes,
you.
let's
Yes,
go.
I'm out.
That's
Apparently,
why- listen.
Robert, you like the bun?
All right, that's why he's the
Listen,
wise
if you
disciple.
keep on, I'm going to put
He
it
is the
on
wise.
right here.
Yeah, check out Nate's channel, The Wise Disciple.
That's right. Okay, Pastor,
Okay.
today.
Sorry, I'm outvoted.
No, that's you are. Let's
You're
just put that
totally
one.
outvoted, honey.
We're gonna put that one to bed.
Okay.
The bun one. The cleansing of the temple.
Yeah, let's cleanse me because I need cleansing. All right, John chapter 2. Let's start in verse 12. The meat of it is 13. But we're going to pick up in 12. I want to read this one line for
John chapter 2, verse 12.
Verse 12. Yeah. By the way, we'll be reading out of our handy Harmony of the Gospels, by the way, which mine's been used. It's got coffee spilled on it the other day.
It's a good sign.
Okay, let's read verse 12, Candy, and just stop there. And I just want to make one point about this. So,
Okay. John 2:12.
Yep.
After this, he went down to Capernaum together with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they stayed there only a few days.
Okay, now that's an interesting little line he puts there, right in between the wedding feast and the cleansing of the temple. And just another side note to, I was raised Catholic. In the Catholic Church, there was the co-redemptress of Mary. Mary's the co-redeemer with Jesus, or Mary is sinless, or Mary's a virgin, perpetual virgin, immaculate conception. She conceived Jesus, but went back to being sinless, which obviously all of that is unbiblical when you just look at the text. The text says right here, Jesus had a mother, brothers, and disciples. And the pushback that I've heard people say is, well, no, when it says he had brothers, those brothers were his disciples. Because you'll say brother Andrew, brother, whatever. But the problem with the text is, just read the text. The text actually delineates.
Yeah,
it mentions
and
both.
disciples.
Right. So, again, I'm not trying to minimize the impact of Mary, but I'm just saying you have to take in context what the text is saying.
Would they have called each other brother back then?
No, I think that's
like, isn't that kind of like
that's
an
like
American
a small Southern Baptist church. You ever been to the church like that? Everybody's brother.
Yeah.
Brother Bob, Brother Robbie.
Yeah.
At my church, it was Brother Robbie.
Yeah,
and I
every now and again still call you Brother
put
Robbie.
on her.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brother Robbie. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is they wouldn't have been calling the disciples Brother Matthew or Brother Andrew. Do you see what I'm saying?
Brother Judas.
Because
Judas.
that wasn't really a thing.
I had a pastor in South Louisiana who used to say, you can call me brother, but you need to tell me who your mother is or tell me if we have the same father, and I'll tell you if you're my brother. Meaning,
I get that.
we got to
Yeah,
have
yeah.
God the Father to be my brother. He's not impressed with
Okay.
that. All right, Luke, John chapter 2, verse 13. Meaning, if we don't have the same father, you're not my brother. Okay,
But
Listen,
what
those
I'm
glasses
saying
are giving
is-
Candy a little bit of attitude.
they're reflecting off to me. I don't know what's there.
No, but what I'm saying is that just should show you that there's a distinction here between his true biological brothers
Yes.
versus just calling other people brothers. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, totally.
Okay.
No, that's true. That's what I'm saying. There was a distinction. All right, John chapter 2, verse 13. Here we go. We're going to get into the Passover. Now, let me just, or the first Passover of Jesus' ministry. There is a question as to whether this is the same cleansing and turning of the tables, whip of cord cleansing as Jesus is going to perform at the end of his ministry. And depending on where, what you think, if you think this is the same one as that one, and John's just telling it out of order, which is a possibility, because you remember the Jewish culture had no problem telling a story or teaching out of order. They could tell a story totally out of order and they were okay with it. So that's one. And by the way, I even entertained that for a while, but I've come to believe it's actually two distinct cleansings. The reason I believed it was only one, and John just moved it forward to teach, is because I was under the assumption, and you would agree with this, that if Jesus goes into, it would be like him walking into Wall Street down in New York and literally unplugging all of the electronics and the monitors and the stock trading equipment and shutting the economy of America down. You only get one chance at that, and then the next, you're dead if you do that again. If you even come in the tip, you know what I'm saying? So the fact that he does it twice, the fact that he does it once and lives, I was always like, I don't know if that's true. But the more I think about it and the more I've read it and studied it, I think it's two. This one is the first kind of shot across the bow. Yeah. And the last one is the linchpin. It's
looking in your harmonies of the gospel, how many accounts are in Luke of this?
How many accounts?
Yes, of him cleansing the temple.
Well, it's only one in every gospel, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke put it at the end. Okay. After he enters. So
that's fine. I know Luke is an orderly account. That's why I was.
Yes, no, Luke does it at the end. That's why people think John just pulled it early because he wanted to
it's not
teach.
An issue for them.
Yeah, because he's showing you that's what he came to do right in the front end. Again, and here's another thing. Wherever you believe on that determines the length of Jesus's ministry. So just remember, this is the fourth Passover in the Gospels, which means his ministry was 3 to 3.5 years. So there's 4 Passovers compared to, or 3 Passovers compared to 2. I think that's what it is. So the difference was his ministry 2.5 years. If you think this is the same one as the end ones, it's 2.5. Gotcha. If you think this happened on the front end, then we have Jesus going to all of these Passovers, which makes his ministry 3.5 years. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Which one do you think it is?
I'm going to lean toward this is one on the front, one on the back. So I think actually Jesus's ministry is bookended with the cleansing, and I'll show you why. Because different scriptures are quoted here. So John chapter 2, verse 13. Let's start with verse 13. Now remember, he just came from the wedding feast. He's got how many disciples with him at this point?
5.
Five disciples, and they are heading to the temple complex, which Jesus has gone to his whole life, but this is the first time he's going to go in his official ministry. Like he's just started the ministry, so now he's going officially as a rabbi with a few disciples. So let's go.
Okay. The Jewish Passover was near, and so Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling oxen, sheep, and doves, and he also found the money changers sitting there. After making a whip out of cords, he drove everyone out of the temple with their sheep and oxen. He also poured out the money changers' coins and overturned the tables. He told those who were selling doves, "Get these things out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a marketplace." And his disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." So the Jews replied to him, "What sign will you show us for doing these things?" Jesus answered, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it up in 3 days." Therefore the Jews said, "This temple took 46 years to build, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking about the temple of his body. So when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the statement Jesus had made. While he was in Jerusalem during the Passover festival, many believed in his name when they saw the signs he was doing. Jesus, however, would not entrust himself to them, since he knew all, and because he did not need anyone to testify about man, for he himself knew that he was in man.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so
I can't believe you let me read that whole
I
thing
know.
without stopping me.
I was actually studying something.
I was going to say, he's distracted
No,
because
I was
he
looking
did
up
not
something.
cut
It just reminded me of something that is pretty interesting. But okay, we're going to come back to that. Okay, I wanted to get a point that I forgot to make a note of. Okay, in order to understand the temple cleansing, you have to understand what the temple was. Okay, for them, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Where is the first account in the Old Testament where we're learning that Mount Moriah, where the temple was built by Solomon and then rebuilt by Zerubbabel and then expanded by King Herod. Where was this temple built? What mountain?
Mount Moriah.
Mount Moriah. Andrew, I want to start with you. Why is Mount Moriah in the Old Testament important? What happened on Mount Moriah? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
Okay. Candy, you want to take a guess?
Where Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac.
Yes. Did you know that?
I remember now.
You remember now, yeah. So Abraham is told by God to go up on top of Mount Moriah and sacrifice his son. And God provides a ram or a lamb to spare the son, to replace the son as a substitute so that he lives, the ram or lamb dies. And so from the very beginning, we see this picture of this sacrificial system that God's going to set up. Then we fast forward to 1 Chronicles 21. David purchases the land from who? You want to take a wild guess, Candy? Who does he purchase the land from to build the temple?
Araunah.
Or Ornan.
Is it the threshing floor of Araunah? I think.
Araunah. I thought it's Arnon.
Look it up.
Say it with
Robert,
confidence.
look it
and
up.
It does not
look
matter.
it up. Where's the threshing floor from? I might have wrote it wrong. And then his son Solomon is going to build the temple. The reason David can't build the temple, he's got too much bloodshed on his hands. God's like, no.
Too much war.
Too much war. And so your son's going to build the temple. Solomon builds the temple. He constructs it. It is an unmatched structure. This thing is opulent. I mean, it's precious metals and gold, and people gave so much to build this thing because they knew it was where God would reside. Now, remember, God is omnipresent. He's everywhere, but he chooses to restrict his presence on earth to the Holy of Holies, and particularly the Ark of the Covenant. Now, contrary to popular opinion, God's not in the box. People think he's in the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
He's not in the box.
Yeah, he's hovering over the mercy seat.
Yeah, the presence of God is over, where the two angels are connected and God's presence is there. That's why you throw the blood on top of on the mercy seat of the offering. I mean, the offering on the mercy seat on top of the box.
Now, to clarify, we're talking prior to Jesus and ascending and the gift of the Holy Spirit who resides within us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So this is Old Testament, and actually even prior to Jesus, because you remember, by the time of Jesus, the Ark of the Covenant is gone, the presence of God is gone, and the place where he met, because it was gone with the Babylonian invasion in Jeremiah 3:15. The Ark of the Covenant's gone. So there's an empty room. But in the Old Testament, when Solomon built it, there was an ark in this room. And why was the temple so important? Because for them, this is what they looked at. The temple for them was the place where heaven and earth met. So if you have one point in the monastic world, mysticism, they used to call it like the thin places of the world, where the veil between reality and the supernatural world was very thin, and you could sense the presence and power of God. Well, that's what they believed. That's the place where heaven and earth met, which is why in John chapter 1, it says Jesus was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and he came and tabernacled with us. So the place where people went to be in the presence of God was now found in a person, Jesus wrapped in flesh around the glory of God, where the place where heaven, so Jesus is in a sense where heaven and earth met in a person, okay? Nehemiah, after the Babylonian captivity, comes back. He enlists every able man to rebuild the temple. We're talking the year about 515 BC. And according to Ezra, in the book of Ezra, chapter 6:15, the second temple is rebuilt. Now, what's interesting about that second temple, it was not up to the same standards as the previous temple. I mean, it was acceptable, but it wasn't respectable. It wasn't the wonder of the world that it was. And so Herod the Great comes on the scene. Herod is half Jewish man, but he is in, so to speak, bed with the Romans. He's in bed with the Greeks, the Greek culture and the Roman Empire. And so basically he wants to be a leader that's powerful with wealth, but he wants to be remembered. And so back then, the way you were remembered is to do certain things, like long after you're gone. What was Herod remembered for? We talked a little bit about this.
You're talking about
while he was on earth.
While he was on earth?
Yeah.
He was a builder, right?
He was the master builder.
Yeah. He built a lot of things.
Built a lot of things.
That would outlive him.
Herod got so bored with the money and time he had, he actually built a mountain.
I was about
Did
to
you
say
know that? He actually built a mountain.
Yeah.
The mountain was called Herodium. He literally built a mountain. He took and here's what's funny: the mountain it wasn't like he built it from scratch. He relocated it. Vivian, we went to Israel. You saw this. That literally the mountain was over here. He took a crew to literally demolish it and rebuild it, and he built his fortress on top of Herodium, and it overshadowed the city of all places of Bethlehem. Yeah. So the point we made when Jesus was born, if you remember, is that we have this clash of two kingdoms. We have Herod, the king of the world, who's the big leader, master carpenter, and then you have this lowly child born in a manger, don't have room for him in a cave, and you have this clash of two kingdoms. When Jesus says, just a side note, when Jesus says, with me, follow me, you will have the same power to look at that mountain and say,
wow,
be moved from here to there.
Wow.
We always think, oh, look, we can actually supernaturally move mountains. Well, last time I checked, I hadn't seen anybody do that. I mean, literally. God could do anything. That? But what God's not saying, you can move mountains that way. What Jesus is saying without saying is, you think Herod's powerful with all his wealth and power and authority? Yeah, he can move mountains. We know. We just saw him do that. But with the power of God, you can have more of an impact in this world than that man.
Wow. That's crazy.
You
never thought of that phrase that way.
Think about that. That's what he's saying. You got to know the context, right? So when you see that, it's not just, hey man, we're going to be mountain movers. It's you're going to have the same kind of power and impact as this man for the kingdom of God, not for the secular world.
Did you say Herod was half Jewish?
Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Who was Jewish? His mom or his dad? His mom?
He is from, you got to do the research, Robert. I don't know this offhand, but he is not fully Jewish. So the Jews rejected him because he wasn't fully Jewish. And then the Romans kind of looked down on him because he was half Jewish. So he kind of was in the middle, but he was an ally of Rome because he could keep the peace in Israel, and then he had 3 sons, and he gave the kingdom to them. Okay, let's get into the Let's get into the temple. Okay. Herod decides to start rebuilding the temple in 20 BC. Now, this is a fascinating building project. 20 BC, Herod starts. Okay, Jesus is going to say in this passage, they're going to say to him, "What do you mean you're going to rebuild this temple? We've been working on this temple for how long?
46 years.
40. What do they say? 46 years. Okay. So if that's the case, if he's building in 20 and then we move forward, what year are we in? If you do the math, what year are we in here at this time? Want to take a wild guess?
I'm going to let you do it.
I was about to say, it's too early for me.
We're in the year 27 AD.
Okay.
27 AD, if you don't count 0, which is exactly, that's how you know how old Jesus is, by the way. You could tell Jesus was born in 4 BC, I believe, 5 or 4 BC. You don't count 0. So Jesus is now 30 at 27 BC. He's going to die at 30 AD at 33. Kind of confusing.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. So his ministry's 3 to 3.5 years. And what we're seeing is they've been at it. Listen, they've been expanding this temple for 46 years, but they're not done. Watch this. Because this temple construction is going to go from 20 BC, get this, to the year 63 AD.
Wow. And then destroyed 7 years later?
And then destroyed 7 years later. Go figure. I didn't think about that. 7 years later, the whole thing's coming. Yeah, 7 again. Okay. There were 4 areas to the Jewish temple. Okay. 4 areas to the temple. Okay. We'll start on the inside and we'll work our way out. Okay. The first one, I'll let you take a guess, Candy. The first one closest to the Holy of Holies and the holy place. So let's back our way back from there. So that's the centerpiece. The first section of the first court was called the court of the...
right outside the Holy of Holies?
Yes.
Was that the court of the Gentiles?
No.
That was the furthest one.
That would be
That's
further
good.
away.
That's the furthest one.
Well, it'd have to be the court of the Jewish people.
Close. Priest.
Okay.
Only the priest could go in the inner circle where the sacrifices, the bronze laver, and all that. Okay. Then outside of that, we have the court of the Jews or the court of the men. Mm-hmm. So the men could go here. So only the priests who were of the lineage of Aaron, who were working in the temple, could go close. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, were the men. Only Jewish men who would go for prayer and worship. We see this even today in kind of a some way, kind of. When we go to the wall, the Western Wall, and men go one side, women go the other, but it was obviously more massive than that. Then the third area was the court of the women. So men and women could go in this court. It was bigger than the other two, but and women could pray and offer sacrifice or worship God, but they could not go into the court of the Jews, men, and they couldn't go in the priests. And then outside of that, which was the largest court,
Court of the Gentiles.
was called the Court of the Gentiles. And this was this was added by Herod, by the way, in his construction of the temple, because Herod wanted to make this a spectacle of the world. He wanted to make it like the Disney World for, it'd be like the Ark, going to the Ark for Christians, an amusement park for Gentiles where they could come, and they'd come from all over the world to see this spectacle. One rabbi said, if you haven't seen the temple, you haven't seen the most beautiful thing in the world. They considered the temple to be like the eighth wonder of the world. Okay. Wow. So it was magnificent. So this Gentile court was huge, but something's going on here that causes Jesus to really be bothered. And that is the merchants are manipulative. The merchants are deceptive, and they take advantage of the people. So, Candy, here's the deal: who is controlling this inner court of production, of selling and buying and exchanging shekels and exchanging coins? Who is in charge of that economy?
I'm going to guess the corrupt priesthood.
Okay, they have a name. What is their name?
I don't know.
Let me think.
Well, was I right, though?
You were right, but you have to get the name to get the ice cream sandwich, which we got
Would
last
it be
week.
the...
You only got five: Essenes, Zealots,
Sanhedrin?
Herodians, Sadducees, Pharisees. You only got five.
Sanhedrin?
Sadducees.
Oh, they're so sad, you see.
Yeah, but well, they're not sad for that. They're sad, you see, because they don't believe in the resurrection. Is the joke? But
They are sad, you see.
yeah, okay. They were in charge of the economy. Okay. So they set the prices for the animals. They set the exchange rate for the shekel. Okay. Now, why was this important? Because when a person would travel, so here's how it works. Josephus said, to frame it here, Josephus said in the year 66 AD alone. Now, let me just preface this. Josephus has a tendency to exaggerate numbers, but that's just what he does. Some people say whenever Josephus says a number, you divide it by a third, because he's, so he'll say 3 million people were there, but it may be 1 million. Okay, but regardless, let's just take it at face value. He said, according to Josephus, in the year 66 AD alone, 255,000 lambs were sacrificed during the Passover. Put that in perspective. If there were 10 attendees for every Passover lamb, like a whole family, let's say, that would mean there was close to, there was about 2.7 to 3 million people. So there you go. I mean, that's literally, imagine the Titan Stadium, just put it in perspective, with all those people times 20.
That's crazy.
And they're all times 20. And they're all going to try to get into this, temple court to participate, Jew and Gentile, man and woman. And so you have a lot of buzz.
The chaos, the bloodshed. I mean,
the town is buzzing. Animals are squealing. Money's clanging. I mean, this is a fiasco that's going on here, okay? But that's not why Jesus is upset. Jesus is upset for what's happening below the surface by the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees are led by two people. We're going to be introduced to them later in the Gospels, but they're led by the grandfather, the godfather, the granddaddy, Annas. And he has his son-in-law named Caiaphas. And those two are the crooks of all crooks, okay?
So are they just trying to make money here?
Oh, yeah. That's why he's mad, right?
Not
because
just trying to make money. They are making money.
Yeah,
But I
they're
mean, I
exploiting
know they
people.
are, but I'm saying, was that the goal of why they were upcharging everybody, was to just make money and make other people suffer?
What do you think?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think they were taking advantage of people who traveled all this way and couldn't bring the best of the best with them.
And what are they doing with all the money?
So they had to buy it there.
I love this. That's what I love about candy. That's a good question. What were they doing with all the money?
They were pocketing it.
They were definitely pocketing it. Okay, this is how the corruption worked, okay?
Yeah.
Don't think, people wrongly think Jesus came to just end selling in the temple. I had a church member. This is a true story now. At my previous church, which will go unnamed, I was there. I was new. I didn't know how things worked. And so we had we had an outside singing group come in. This is back at Brainerd when we had these.
There it is.
Sorry, I
you said it was unnamed.
Yeah, okay, at Brainerd. I've only pastored 2 churches before, so you can go figure. But they had a singing quartet or something come in back then. I don't know. And so the group asked me, "Hey, can we sell our CDs?" Which is what people do. That's just not abnormal. In the lobby.
Right.
I said, of course you can sell your CDs in the lobby. So they came early, set up tables, and right when they were getting up singing, one of my deacons came over. He said, "Brother Robbie, we got a problem." I said, "Yes, sir. What? I won't mention his name." And they said, "We got somebody selling merchants in the lobby. We're gonna, God's house is a house of prayer, not a house of business. And we're going to have to say no to that." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" "Yeah, we're not going to turn this into a den of robbers selling."
Yeah.
That is not what Jesus is doing.
Yeah.
They had to sell things in the temple court.
Right.
They had to exchange things in the temple court. He's not against that. 2 things were happening here which he was against. Number one is this. You traveled for Passover or one of the festivals, and you brought an animal, okay? Most of the people traveled in upwards of 20, 30, 40 miles away, okay, by foot. On that long, arduous journey, the lamb could fall. The lamb could get injured, like legitimately. The lamb could get bitten. The lamb could break a leg. And at that point, this lamb that you had preserved to be offered to God is now unacceptable. Those things legitimately happened. And so what would happen is these people, and then some people would just travel from the east or the west, and they wouldn't have a lamb, but they needed a special lamb. And the sacrificial lambs, by the way, were raised in Bethlehem, of all cities, right? And so they had those acceptable for the temple court. And so you would get there, and they would say, "Okay, I need to buy a lamb." Now, if I bought a lamb in the village, it was, let's say, $1. But if I bought a lamb at the temple, the price was 4x what it cost in the village. 4x. So if I paid, $100 for a lamb in the village, I've got to pay $400 for the same lamb. And so that was unacceptable to the Lord. But the second thing we see in the text is this. They had to collect a temple tax. You were required to bring your temple tax to the Lord, which was a shekel. Now, I did some research this morning, and I found out that I've never heard this before, the only acceptable shekel that they received was called the Tyrrhenian shekel. Did you know this, Chris? You ever heard this, Vivian? Nate, have you heard this before? The Tyrrhenian? I've never heard this before. The Tyrrhenian from Tyre in Sidon, the Tyre. Okay, now here's the history of this. This coin on one side had a Melkart Heracles. I don't know how to say that, which was basically a pagan deity on one side.
How do you spell this again?
It was MELQARTH -HERAKLES. It was a pagan deity, so it was a face of an image. Okay, I don't know. I'm just.
Good luck.
That's fine.
Okay, it was the face of an image on one side, and then on the other side there was an eagle, a graven image on the other side. Now, the eagle we know from the Book of Revelation, and we will know this,
means America.
No, it doesn't mean.
I'm just joking.
That's what messes people up with Revelation. You know what messes Revelation scholars up? In times, guys, bless their heart. I'm not throwing you under the bus, but you would agree with this. They have it just eats them up that they can't find America. In the end time. You ever heard this before? They cannot find America in the end times.
I heard on Instagram the other day that the Garden of Eden was in Florida, South Florida. Where only one type of tree grows.
No, I wouldn't.
I've
I've been to parts of Florida. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
So basically, this image is a picture of something. The eagle, not America, the Romans. Did you know that? The Roman eagle. That's why when you see the eagle in Revelation, it's a symbol of the Roman Empire.
Is this what you're talking about here?
Okay, there we go. There's there's the eagle on the right, which would have been Rome. And then there's the face, the laureate head. Okay. This coin was very heavy. It was 14.2 grams, and it contained roughly 95% silver. And for some reason, as crazy as this was, this pagan graven image coin was accepted by the Jewish leaders to be the only acceptable coin to put into the offering And we know that God strictly prohibited this coin at all because it had a graven image on it, right? So they declared that the Tyrian shekel was the only legal currency. This is from a couple places I got reference if you're interested. But here's the problem with that. The problem is, not only should they not give this coin to the Lord, they shouldn't even have it in their pocket. Now, you remember on one occasion, they're going to question Jesus about who to pay taxes to. Do you remember this account?
Oh, yeah.
And they're going to say, who do we pay taxes to? Do we give to Caesar, or do we give to the Rome, or we don't? Yeah. And they kind of, those questions, they back Jesus in a corner, because if Jesus says give to Rome, they're going to say you're in bed, with the traitor. Yeah, you're a traitor. You're in bed with the enemy. But if he says don't give taxes to Rome, they're going to go to the Romans and say this guy's an insurrectionist, take him to jail. So he can't win. So what does Jesus do in a masterful way?
Oh, yeah.
I love this. One of my favorite. I love this passage.
Who has one of these coins?
Yeah. The guy who questions him says, what should I do? Pay taxes. Jesus is like, hey, bud. And he doesn't even know what he's doing. He's like, hey, do you got a coin? Let's just look at let me give you a sermon illustration right here. The guy unknowingly pulls out the coin. And Jesus says to him, whose image is on the coin? Well, that guy's image is on the coin.
Yeah.
That head of that Roman leader, or, whatever that was, a minute. And he says, whose image is on the coin? And then he says, what? Give to Caesar what Caesar's, give to God what's God. Here's what he's saying, without ruining the whole passage. Jesus is basically giving him a picture of how we should give ourselves to God. It's way bigger than taxes and money. What Jesus is saying without saying is there is an image stamped on this coin, and the image on the coin means that you belong to the person who stamped it. So give back to them completely what they've given to you. Wow. What he doesn't say, you ready for this? What he doesn't say is, or the question he doesn't ask is, what image is stamped on you?
Right.
Now, he implies this when he says, give to Caesar, Caesar's God to God. But what he doesn't say is, what image is stamped on you? Now, they know their Bible from Genesis. They know the image stamped on them. They know the fingerprint on their life. It's the image of God. So what he's saying is, God's image, and if you're listening, here's what he's saying. God's image is stamped on your life. Therefore, since God created you and made you, you should give yourself wholly back to God.
Yeah. Wow.
They think it's about money. Jesus is making it about devotion.
Yeah.
Okay, so they had this tax that was required, but the tax was ridiculous. John MacArthur just gives us a little insight on the economic system. He said it was a system of perversion. This is the Sadducean system of prostitution, travesty, extortion, monopoly. It was a horrendous operation of noise and traffic. It was anything but a house of prayer. Jesus went in and ripped into all of it. He started driving people out who were buying and selling. He started sending out the animals and taking them out. He started kicking over stools of the money changers, and he drives them out. Every crook, every exploiter of the poor, all the rotten Sadducees and the priests that oversaw the operation fell under his attention and his authority when he comes into this temple right here. Now, you would think right away it's just about money, but it's deeper than that. Because Jesus is going to tell us why he's here. Okay. Notice what he said. Now, this is where there's a difference between the John 2 turning of the tables and the Matthew, Luke, Mark turning of the tables, where Jesus says, you have turned my father's house my father's house to be a house of prayer to the nations. You've made it a den of robbers. He doesn't say that here. That's where he says there. He doesn't say that here. Notice what he says here. Notice what he says in John 2:16, Candy.
Verse 16, he
verse
told
16.
those who were selling doves, get these things out of here. Stop turning my father's house into a marketplace.
Okay, into a marketplace. Now, what he does is he walks in the temple and he makes a whip of cords. I'm going to ask you in the audience, why does he make a whip of cords as a weapon? What do you think? Think about this.
Is it a foreshadowing of how he will be punished?
I didn't think of that.
Andrew.
Look at you today. That's pretty
It's
good.
a question. I don't know.
Oh, no, you say it with authority.
No, I was just asking.
Oh, yeah.
I said
no,
it was
that
a
is
question.
interesting.
I said, is it?
I
started
didn't think
it as
about,
a question
I didn't
starts.
think about that in that same temple, he's going to be in the outer court. He's going to be beaten with whip. Yeah, I didn't think about that. No, it's because there were no weapons allowed in the temple. You couldn't bring a knife in the temple.
Okay, so
you
he
couldn't
had to
bring a
make
club in
something.
the temple.
Yeah.
So he looks around.
It was easier to braid a whip than whittle
Yes.
a sword.
Yes. So he basically he makes it is a technical term for this. He goes in there and let me see if I can find this. He makes this whip of cords with what's called a twisted rushes. That's the technical term. Twisted rushes are the bull rush in Hebrew. Bull rush is the idea. Okay, what is this? It was a fibrous plant that was prevalent back then where you could take the stem of the plant and think of basket weaving or mat making where they made mats with this fibrous plant, kind of like a palm tree.
Yeah.
And they would and so Jesus basically took this plant and he tied it around and made this whip of cords, this rope, if you will. It was just a weapon to get attention to drive these people out. And Jesus says, "You've turned my house into a marketplace," and it's going to stop here. Now, notice, keep going. Can you read what he says here in the next thing?
Okay. And his disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me."
Keep going.
So
Yeah.
the Jews replied to him, "What sign will you show us for doing these things?"
Okay.
Jesus answered, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it up in 3 days."
Yeah. Okay. So Jesus is trying to drive out people who are manipulating the system. And when Jesus comes and drives these people out who are manipulating the system, immediately the rabbis would have thought of two prophecies. Two prophecies from the Old Testament come to mind. The first one, Candy, turn to Zechariah 14. Andrew, you're going to turn to Malachi 3. But right away, when Jesus says, "You've turned my father's house into a house of," or a marketplace, a place of inflation, a place of manipulation, he's saying something. Okay, Zechariah 14 is a prophecy about the Messiah. This is the end of the book.
What Zechariah what?
14:20. And I want you to read 20 and 21. And I want you to see what he's saying here.
Okay. Verse 20 says, "On that day, the words 'Holy to the Lord' will be on the bells of the horses. The pots in the house of the Lord will be like the sprinkling basins before the altar. Every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah will be holy to the Lord of armies. All who sacrifice will come and use the pots to cook in. And on that day, there will no longer be a Canaanite in the house of the Lord of armies."
Okay, that's the line. Okay, it's kind of confusing if you don't understand what's going on. So what he says is, on that day, the day the Messiah returns, on this day, the holy to the Lord are the words of God. Okay, so what he's saying is, when the Messiah comes, here's what's going to happen. Everything's going to be cleansed and holy. There's no need for sacrifice. There's no need for any of this. Therefore, on that day, watch this, there will no longer be a Canaanite in the house of the Lord of armies. That word Canaanite began to circulate around, began to be accepted as a traitor or a brigand. Okay, more of an insurrectionist. Let me say it that way. It was a person who would come into the temple and think that the way we're going to take over this as an outsider, the way we're going to take over this is by force. They were always fighting with the Canaanites. They were always at battle with the Canaanites. So what he's saying is there's no longer going to be a time when these traders, these businessmen are going to come into the temple of God. God's going to get rid of them, but it's deeper than that. It's a guy who causes problems. In fact, you can trace that word Canaanite and trader to the same two guys who were crucified on the side of Jesus. They were that. Why did they get crucified? You remember? Because they tried to bring about the kingdom of heaven by force. They were, quote, zealous for the things of God. Now notice what the next thing Jesus says. The disciples remembered, or the disciples say, "Zeal for my house will consume me." So right away they're starting to say, okay, we're putting the pieces together. Because zeal was where we get the word what? Do you remember this?
Zealot.
Zealot. Zeal was where we get the word zealot, and it actually comes from Psalm 69. This is a direct connection to Psalm 69. In Psalm 69, it says, "Zeal for my house will consume me," but it also can be translated as, "The temple will be his destruction." That's the same line. The temple will be his destruction. Zeal for the temple will consume me. Meaning, watch this. What that shows us is Jesus' mission, one of the main missions he had, besides dying on the cross for our sin, obviously, Jesus' mission was to cleanse the temple, to put things back in order, to sort things out so that God could meet with his people. That's what Jesus came to do. Remember, he came for the lost sheep of Israel. He didn't go to the Gentile. He didn't turn his face away until Matthew chapter 13 with the parables. Before that, he came to Israel, came to the religious leaders. He came to the Sadducees and Pharisees. But what did they do? They rejected him. And so Jesus is basically, with this passage, that's why I think he does it twice. This is the shot across the bow to say, you don't clean things up. You got a 3-year timeline and it starts now. The clock starts now. You better clean things up, because if you don't clean things up in a few years, this whole thing's going to be decimated, which is exactly what he says. He says, I'm going to take this thing down and I'm going to destroy it and raise it up. And they said 46 years. He's like, I'm not talking about a building. I'm talking about my body.
Yeah. Now, is this at all symbolic to our bodies being the temple and Jesus being the only person who can cleanse us of our sins?
Yeah, I think there's stages. Yes. First, the temple was a place where they met with God. Then they see the transition, the temple being a person. Jesus is the embodiment of the glory of God. And then the unthinkable. Paul says, your bodies, we read this, and so your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. Yes. So that you see this progression. Think of it this way. In the Old Testament, God created a temple for his people. Mm-hmm. In the New Testament, God created a people to be his temple.
Yeah. Wow.
The people are the temple. You and I, as Christians, are the temple of God, which is why Paul is so particular about don't give your bodies to sexual immorality. Don't give to lust. Don't prostitute your body through adultery and idolatry.
All that is the same stuff that's happening in this physical temple.
Yes. Right. Yeah, exactly. They're supposed to be a pure, holy, religious, spiritual group, and the priests are exploiting the people for a profit. Mm-hmm. And it shouldn't happen. Okay, so the first thing we see is Zechariah 14:20. I read some commentaries that said the rabbis would have immediately thought, okay, this is what Jesus is coming to do. By cleansing out the money changers and getting rid of and stopping the business for a moment, it is reminiscent of the day of the Lord, when the Messiah will come and no Canaanite in the house of the Lord of armies will. A Canaanite's an outsider. They're coming to trade and do business, but they're actually coming to cause problems too as well. And so Jesus is saying, hey, that's not going to happen. But the second one is Malachi 3. So read that quickly. Okay. Malachi 3, verse 1.
Okay, see, I am going to send my messenger, and he will clear the way before me. Then the Lord you seek will suddenly come to his temple, the messenger of the covenant you delight in. He is, he is coming.
Said the Lord of armies. Okay. So the first part is John the Baptist. Mm-hmm. We know a messenger's coming to clear the way, to prepare the way. Okay. But the second part is Jesus. And it says, you will know. This is why I think there's 2 accounts and not just one. You will know this is the man. You're going to identify him, because as soon as he comes and the way is clear, he's going to come to where? To his temple. Yeah. See, he is coming. Now watch what he's going to do. Verse 2. But who can endure his coming? And who will be able to stand? For he will come like a refiner's fire and like a launderer's bleach. I like that CSB. He will be like a refiner and a purifier of silver. He will purify the sons of Levi. How do you become a priest?
Through being a
Levite, and refine them like gold and silver. Then they will present offerings to the Lord in righteousness. Listen, this is an exact prophecy of what he is doing right here. What is he doing? He's purifying the temple, but he's also trying to purify the gold and silver that they're offering, which is not even supposed to be acceptable. Wow. And he came to purify the priesthood. Yeah. This is exactly. So here's the thing. We say this all the time. It's almost as if Jesus has a map, a manual that, and God doesn't give it to him because in his humanity, he willingly gave up his divine prerogative, his divine authority, and came to earth to live a life of obedience. So I don't think Jesus has the whole mission.
Yeah.
I think he knows where he's going, but he doesn't have the whole mission. And that's why he has to spend so much time repeatedly with the Father. It's almost like God downloads it into his brain, every night. All right, this is what the mission is for the day. But watch this. The mission or the manual he's following is not by happenstance. We talked about this before. If Jesus heals a man, it's for a purpose. If Jesus says a truth, it's for a purpose. He's not just haphazardly. It's not that he heals everybody. In fact, he doesn't heal everybody.
Yeah.
He heals certain people certain times. Okay, so here's the point. This is part of the manual. Jesus, it's like God's like, all right, John the Baptist, okay, check, already happened. You have to start your ministry, check, already been baptized. You have to endure the temptation in the wilderness to show that where Israel failed for 40 years, you're going to succeed after 40 days. Where Israel was tempted and tested and didn't overcome, you overcame. And then after that, he's like, all right, now we're going to go cleanse the temple because this is the protocol. This is the agenda. By the way, I was studying last night. This is very fascinating. This is a temptation insight. What is the devil constantly said to Jesus in every temptation is, if you say, right? If you are, okay. But if you notice, remember the temptation. If you are the Son of God, do you remember this? Y'all remember this? This is fascinating. If you are the Son of God, then do this.
Yeah.
Now, why did that cut to the core to Jesus? Think about that.
Well, in his humanity, it was poking at the potential pride that we have as humans.
Yeah, part of it, but it's more than that. What do you think? What did Jesus just hear from his Father before he went? This is pretty powerful.
Son.
Yeah.
What did he just hear from his dad? This is my
Beloved son.
This is the Son of God. And I don't think it's any accident that the first time he's tempted by Satan, Satan says, if you are, do you think you really are the Son of God? And I think that's how Satan works. He's so subtle.
Yeah.
He takes the very word of God over our life.
Twist it.
Yeah. Did God really say you should? That's what he does. So if you're in the middle of a battle and you're questioning the word of God, did God really say? That's almost an indication you are being tempted and attacked by the enemy, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to misconstrue, takes a little bit of truth and he misconstrue. Listen, God said you are, but do you really believe you're the Son of God? Now, in his humanity, obviously Jesus was learning and growing.
Right.
In his divinity, obviously he was God. But in the moment, it's a real temptation. Sure. And I really believe those are real temptations. If not, it was a theatrical act that Jesus put on. And at the end of it, the disciples would have said, that's pretty good, boss, but you're God, so you weren't going to give in.
Yeah.
And granted, he would have never given in because of his divinity. But in his humanity, you got to remember, he felt the full brunt of the temptation. See, the difference between Jesus tempted and us is when we're tempted to a point of no return, we just give in and the temptation goes away.
Yeah.
For Jesus, remember this, every time his humanity was strained to the point of no return, he could not give in because his divinity within wouldn't allow it. So just think about Jesus' temptation. He experienced it to the nth degree.
Right, for
sure. Let's go back to the end. We're almost done. Okay, Malachi 3 says he's coming and he's going to cleanse the temple. And he's going to cleanse the priesthood. But the line here is the coming one. See that he is coming. But who can endure the day of his what? Coming. That terminology, the coming one, we'll address this in future episodes, but the coming one was a code word for the Messiah. Did you know that? The coming one. So
I would assume that.
Yeah.
What's that?
I would assume that.
Yeah, they would know that the coming one, because when he comes with certain benefits and things. So the coming one was a code word for this is God himself coming on the scene. Now, how do I know that? Go to Matthew 11 and we'll finish with this. But I want to show you what John the Baptist is going to ask Jesus through his disciples. Matthew chapter 11. John's in prison. And he knows Jesus is the Messiah, but he's waiting for the agenda to get going. A little slow. Moving your feet a little bit too slow, Jesus. So John sends a question to Jesus, verse 3. But Candy, pick up and let's just read 11:1, and we'll read through verse 3. Watch this.
Okay. When Jesus had finished giving instructions to his 12 disciples, he moved on from there to teach and preach in their towns. Now, when John heard in prison what the Christ was doing, he sent a message through his disciples and asked him, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?"
Oh, okay. Now, what is he asking there? What do you think he's asking there, Candy? Are you the one to come? What is he asking? Another way to say that. What is he
are
asking?
you the Messiah?
Yeah, are you the coming one, basically, okay? We get this from Malachi chapter 3, but we also get this from Zechariah 9:9. Rejoice, daughter Zion, shout and triumph, daughter Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He's righteous and victorious, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So that's the idea here. And so when John asks, a lot of people think John's questioning Jesus. I mean, golly, are you the one to come? Man, he doesn't know if he knows. John knows who Jesus is. He said it repeatedly. God showed me the one I'm going to baptize. That's the one. He has no question. Look, the Lamb of God who takes away. He knows who Jesus is. He's not asking about Jesus's identity. He's asking about Jesus's kingdom agenda. Here's what he's asking. When are we going to get on with this thing? Because in my mind, John the Baptist, fire needs to come down from heaven, destruction against the enemies. You're dragging your feet, man. Let's get this thing going. Why is Herod still lollygagging around, and why am I in prison, by the way?
He lived such a bold lifestyle himself.
Yeah.
That was kind of his
And he called out sin, which was great, and he prepared the way. So he's basically thinking Jesus is coming with a sword to destroy. And Jesus quotes to him in Matthew 11. What does he quote? No, go back and tell John, the dead or the lame walk, and the deaf hear, and the blind see, and the prisoners are set free. What he's saying is, no, this is the kingdom agenda. It's just, John, not what you think.
Yeah.
And basically, when he tells John that this is happening, what he's saying to John, boy, this is a hard pill to swallow. It's hard for us too at times in our own life. He's basically saying, John, it's happening, and I'm not coming to get you. You're going to have to stay in.
Yeah.
And this is part of the plan. You're going to die. But that's okay, because it's way bigger than what you can see, and you're the greatest prophet of all because you're the last prophet. You're the bridge between the old and new covenant, and so you're the greatest. But the reality is you're going to die, and it's not going to turn out like you expected, and it's not the plans you had for your life, and it's not all these things you imagine the kingdom to be. But don't miss this. It's part of God's plan, and we all win. And you need to be okay with that. And when we get there, we could talk about all the times God shuts down a dream or a plan for his purpose, but it's still good because it's according to his plan.
So how long after this does John die?
After he's in prison, he asked, it's not very long.
So they basically die around the same age.
John and Jesus?
Yeah, just a couple years apart.
Probably John dies a couple of years earlier. Yeah, John's probably
it's just so sad.
6 months older.
Sad.
It's sad, yeah. Well, Jim Elliot, he wrote, he died early.
Yeah.
Jim Elliot, Nate Saint, Auca Indians down to Ecuador with the gospel to the Waidani tribe. Jim Elliot said in his journal, God, I don't want to live a long life, but I want to live a full life for you.
Yeah.
It's an interesting line. I don't want to live a long life, but I want to live a full life for you. And I think that's good for all of us as Christians, I mean, you can have an impact in a short period of time when you align your life with the plan of God for your life. God has a plan for all of us. And we talk about this at Long Hollow. The greatest thing we want you to do is to figure out what your unique God-given calling is so that you can live that out every single day of your life.
Yeah.
Just to recap where we are, Jesus comes in and basically says this kind of corruption needs to stop. And this is the shot across the bow. Jesus is like, okay, I'm going to give you guys to clean this thing up. But if you don't, I'm coming back for recompense. I'm coming back. And I think that's what Revelation is about. Revelation is about the carrying out of the destruction of the temple, which was a picture of the old covenant. So when Jesus died, AD 30 at 33, that was the end of the old covenant spiritually, supernaturally, sacrificially, meaning there was no need for another sacrifice because Jesus gave his life on the cross, rose from the dead, ascended to heaven. So the sacrificial system, Hebrews 8:13, the old covenant is passing away and eventually will be obsolete. So that's the old covenant. But the temple was still intact. And so people were still making sacrifices, even though Jesus ended it. So 40 years later, which again, the number 40 is a season of testing and trying. Basically, God's like, here's the test, turn it around. They didn't. And at the end of that 40 years in AD 70, you have the ending of the sacrificial system physically. So you have spiritually AD 30, 70 spiritually, physically, and that's the end of all things. And that's why I think Revelation is written the way it is. It's written about the, in a sense, somebody said divorce papers or the separation agreement or the judgment and condemnation to the people of God who said they would obey him and didn't, who said they would receive his Messiah and didn't. And God says, there's nowhere to go from here. It's over.
Yeah.
We don't need a temple because my son was the temple and now the believers are the temple of God.
Yeah.
So that's what Jesus is going to do. After this, we're going to move on to Nicodemus.
Ooh. All right. Well, there's a lot to
ready for
marinate
this?
on there.
And we're going to talk about
I'm trying to close it, Pastor.
I'm going to give you a little teaser. All the ways a person could be born again. And by the way, there were 6 of them. Did you know this? 6 ways to be born again in that culture.
Wow.
And And Nicodemus asked about one of them. So,
all right, well, Pastor, that's a lot. Good stuff. Thank you so much. You did mention Revelation there, so I do want to let you know, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can click over to the other playlist and you can watch all of our series on the book of Revelation. Or if you're listening, there's also all of those Revelation series on Long Hollow's podcast there as well. So be sure to check those out. Also, if you got any questions, man, we'd love to connect with you. You can pop a question in the comments on YouTube. You can drop us a DM on Instagram at The Forgotten Jesus. We'd love to connect with you there. So share this with a friend. This was a fun one, Pastor. Appreciate it. Thank you, Candy. Love the glasses. And we'll see you on the next episode.